The morning sun was barely up when I found myself standing by the pool, coffee in hand, staring at the furious woman pounding on the resort gate. Her voice cut through the quiet valley, calling 911 as if I were some trespasser. She didn't know this was my land, every inch of it. She didn't know that the pool she was demanding to use was part of a story that would teach her a lesson about respect and ownership. By the time the deputies arrived, the truth would burn hotter than the Arizona sun. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The day started like any other in the valley, calm and quiet with the warm Arizona sun just creeping over the mountains. I had my usual mug of black coffee, leaning on the rough wooden railing of my porch when I spotted her. A woman in a flashy floral swimsuit and oversized sunglasses came striding up the gravel path like she was on some kind of mission. She didn't glance at the private property signs posted along the fence line. She didn't even slow down. She walked straight to the pool gate as if she owned the place, tossed her towel on a lounge chair, and began shouting, "Hey, open this gate right now. We all pay for this pool." I set my coffee down and walked over. I'd dealt with entitled folks before, but there was something about her tone that made my teeth clench. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "this pool is private property. It's not open to the public, and it's not part of any HOA. She spun around, one hand on her hip, her sunglasses glinting like a shield. "Don't you start with me. I'm part of the HOA, and we all have rights to this place. You can't just block me out." I stared at her for a second, half tempted to laugh. "I'm not blocking you out. I'm telling you, this pool is mine. I built it. I maintain it. The HOA has no claim here." For a moment, she just stood there, her mouth open like she couldn't believe anyone would tell her no. Then her face twisted into a look I'd seen before, anger mixed with self-righteousness. "Oh, you'll regret this," she snapped, yanking her phone out of her bag. "I'm calling 911. Let's see how you like it when the sheriff gets here." I stayed where I was. I'd learned long ago that you don't back down from people like her. If you do, they'll trample over you forever. I leaned against the fence, watching her bark into her phone. The pool behind me shimmered under the rising sun. To me, it wasn't just a pool. It was the first piece of this valley I built with my own hands. Years ago, when I bought this land, it was just dusty hills and a half-broken cabin. I worked day and night to turn it into something worth living in. I hauled concrete, laid tile, and planted every mesquite tree by hand. I poured my savings and my sweat into this place. This valley wasn't just mine on paper, it was mine in every sense of the word, and I wasn't about to let some HOA Karen stomp all over it. Minutes later, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up, its light bar catching the morning sun. Karen smirked like she'd already won. "Oh, you're in trouble now," she muttered under her breath. The deputy stepped out, a tall man with a calm, measured expression. He looked from her to me, one eyebrow raised. "We got a call about a dispute over property access," he said. "Ma'am, is this the man refusing you access?" "Yes," she said, almost shouting. "This man is blocking me from using the community pool. He has no right to do that." I kept my tone even. "Deputy, this isn't a community pool. It's part of my private property. I can show you the deed." Karen scoffed. "He's lying. He's just some stubborn old man who thinks he can keep everything to himself." The deputy looked at me. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" "Sure do," I said. I went into my cabin and came back with a folder thick with papers, property deeds, survey maps, and tax records. I laid them out on the porch rail for the deputy to see. "Bought the entire resort valley 5 years ago," I explained. "The HOA line ends 3 miles down the road. Everything here, the cabins, the trails, and this pool belongs to me." The deputy took his time reviewing the documents. Finally, he nodded. "Looks like he's telling the truth." "Ma'am," Karen's face went from red to purple. "That can't be right," she cried. "We pay fees for this place." I shook my head. "You pay for your HOA park and tennis courts down the hill. This is private land. I don't take HOA fees, and I don't answer to them. You're trespassing." "You can't do this," she spat. grabbing her towel. "You'll regret this. I know people. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I stayed silent, watching her stomp to her car. Gravel kicked up behind her as she sped off. Something told me she wasn't finished. People like her never stop at one defeat. As the cruiser rolled away, I turned back toward the pool. The water rippled gently in the breeze, reflecting the sunlight like glass. I leaned on the fence, sipping the last of my coffee, and let the quiet settle around me again. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen had the look of someone who'd go to war just to prove a point. If she wanted a fight, I was ready. I'd worked too hard to let someone like her push me off what I owned. And as I looked out across the valley, I swore to myself I'd make sure she learned exactly who she was dealing with. After Karen's car disappeared down the dusty road, I stood there for a while, staring at the still water of the pool. Most folks see a pool as just a place to cool off, but for me, it was the heart of this valley, proof that I had taken a wild stretch of Arizona land and turned it into something worth living for. I ran my hand along the smooth wooden fence I'd built myself, every nail hammered by my own calloused hands, and felt the memories come rushing back. I first came to this valley nearly 6 years ago. Back then, it wasn't much more than a forgotten patch of land surrounded by pine-studded hills. There was a crumbling cabin that looked like it might collapse in the next big storm, a well that hadn't drawn clean water in years, and acres of rocky ground that nobody wanted to tame. But I saw something in it, a chance to build a place where I could breathe, a place that belonged to no one but me. I worked through the brutal summers and the cold desert nights, often sleeping under the stars because the roof of the cabin was too rotten to trust. I hauled lumber in my pickup, mixing concrete by hand when I couldn't afford a proper mixer. Every payday from my construction jobs went straight into this land. Little by little, the valley started to change. I repaired the cabin, built a new barn, and cleared out brush that had grown wild over decades. The pool came later, after the basics were done, and it felt like a crown on everything I had built. The pool was my way of saying I had made it, of carving out a life that no one could take from me. I used natural stone from the nearby creek for the border, set up a deck with old cedar wood, and planted mesquite trees around it for shade. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every time I walked out there and saw the sunlight bouncing off the water, I felt a peace that no HOA meeting or city ordinance could ever give me. The resort valley wasn't just a pool and a cabin anymore. Over time, I added 3 guest cabins for friends and family, a workshop where I built furniture from the pine trees I harvested, and a fire pit big enough for a dozen folks to sit around. My nearest neighbor lived 3 miles down the road, and that was just how I liked it. No noise, no busybodies, and no one trying to tell me what to do with my own land. But then the HOA started creeping in. A few years ago, a housing development popped up near the southern edge of my property line. At first, I didn't think much of it. They built their tidy houses and manicured lawns, and I stayed up here on my ridge, minding my own business. But soon enough, I started hearing stories about this HOA, their endless rules about paint colors, lawn heights, and who could use the community pool they built down the hill. I wanted no part of it. The problem was, some of those new residents didn't understand where the HOA ended and my land began. They'd drive up here thinking my property was just another part of their community. I had to put up signs, private property and no trespassing, but that didn't stop everyone. And then came Karen. She wasn't the first one to mistake my pool for something she had rights to, but she was by far the loudest and most entitled. I couldn't help but shake my head as I thought about her threatening to make me regret it. People like her believe they can bully their way through life, but I've spent too many years fighting for every inch of this land to be pushed around now. I've fought floods, droughts, and hard winters. One angry HOA woman wasn't going to scare me off. After the deputy left, I spent the rest of the morning working on the ranch. I fixed a loose hinge on the barn door, chopped some firewood, and checked the fence lines. These small chores keep the place alive. They also remind me why I love this life, because it's honest. Out here, you get exactly what you work for. There are no shortcuts, no committees, no HOA rules telling you the color of your front door, just hard work and the quiet satisfaction of seeing the results. By midday, the sun was blazing, and I sat under the shade of the mesquite trees by the pool, drinking a cold glass of water. I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her don't just storm off and forget. She'd be back, and next time she'd probably bring backup, maybe her HOA board or even a lawyer. That thought didn't scare me. In fact, it made me smirk a little, because if they wanted a fight, I had the one thing they didn't proof: ironclad proof that this valley was mine, and no HOA rulebook could touch it. I pulled the property folder out again, flipping through the old maps and deeds. The original boundaries of this land stretched farther than most people realized. My grandfather used to say, "When you own something, make sure you know every inch of it." I did, and I was ready to show anyone who questioned it just how deep those boundaries went. As the sun dipped lower, I stood and looked across the valley. The cabins glowed in the soft light, and the pool sparkled like a mirror. This was my sanctuary, my retreat from a world that always seemed to be rushing and arguing. If Karen thought she could barge in and claim a piece of it, she was in for a rude awakening. The day after Karen's outburst, I woke to the sound of tires crunching on gravel again. For a moment, I thought she had returned, but when I looked out the window, it was a different car, a white SUV with tinted windows. It rolled to a stop near the pool fence, and two men stepped out. They were wearing polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched on the front. So, Karen had already called in reinforcements. I grabbed my hat and walked out to meet them, my boots kicking up dust with each step. "Morning," I said evenly, leaning against the fence. "Something I can help you with." The taller one, who looked like he spent too much time at the golf course, cleared his throat. "Sir, we're with the Valley Ridge HOA. We understand there was a misunderstanding yesterday with one of our residents. We're here to resolve it." Misunderstanding? I raised an eyebrow. "Your resident trespassed on my property, screamed at me, and called 911. That's not a misunderstanding, that's harassment." The second man, younger and more nervous looking, tried to smile. "What my colleague means is, this pool area has been used by the community for years. We thought it was part of the HOA grounds." I shook my head slowly, keeping my tone calm but firm. "You thought wrong. This entire resort valley pool, cabins, and every square inch of land you see here is mine, bought and paid for. Your HOA stops 3 miles south of here. I don't answer to your board or your fees." The older man frowned. "Sir, this area has always been open to residents. Are you sure you have the proper documents to prove ownership?" I stepped closer, pulling the folder of deeds and maps I had tucked under my arm. "I'm more than sure. Would you like to see the original purchase contract, the tax records, or the county surveyor's map? Take your pick. I've got them all right here." They glanced at each other, clearly realizing this wasn't going the way they'd planned. I laid the documents on the fence post, flipping to the official property map with the county seal. "See this line? That's where your HOA ends. Everything north of this ridge is mine. This pool was built on my land, with my money, and I've maintained it without a dime from your HOA funds." The younger man's face flushed. "Well, perhaps we should have double-checked the boundaries. The older one didn't give up so easily. We can still come to an agreement. Maybe we can draw up some kind of shared access contract." I cut him off. "Not happening. I built this place for peace and quiet, not for HOA drama. I'm not signing anything. Tell your residents to stay off my property, or the sheriff will be the one giving warnings next time." For a moment, they just stood there, clearly unused to someone standing up to them. HOA boards thrive on intimidation, on scaring people into compliance with threats of fines and rules. But I wasn't one of their suburban homeowners. I had carved this place out of the wild with my own hands. They couldn't bully me. "Very well," the older man said finally, his tone stiff. "We'll discuss this with the board." "You do that," I replied. "And tell Karen to stay off my land. She's not welcome here." They left without another word, their SUV kicking up dust as it rolled back down the hill. I stood by the fence, watching them disappear, feeling the tension rise in my gut. Something told me This wasn't the end. Karen didn't strike me as the kind of person to let go of her false sense of power, and now she had her board involved. I could almost hear her plotting her next move. That evening, as the sun sank low and painted the hills in gold, I sat on my porch, thinking about what might come next. If they wanted to make this a fight, I'd be ready. I started gathering every document I had: purchase receipts, county records, even photos of me building the pool years ago. I stacked them in a neat pile on my kitchen table. I wasn't just going to defend what was mine, I was going to make sure they never tried this stunt again. Later that night, I heard a truck slow down on the gravel road. I stepped outside with a lantern, just in time to see a note pinned to my front gate. It was written in bold, messy handwriting. "This isn't over. You can't keep us out forever." There was no signature, but I didn't need one to know who it came from. Karen's pride wouldn't let her walk away quietly. I pulled the note off the gate and crumpled it in my fist. "We'll see about that," I muttered under my breath. The valley was quiet again, but I knew it was just the calm before the storm. Tomorrow, I'd head into town to speak with the sheriff directly. If Karen and her HOA board wanted to test me, I'd be ready with the law and the truth on my side. By the third day, Karen was back, and this time she didn't come alone. I was patching a fence post near the barn when I heard the sound of engines grinding up my gravel driveway. I looked up and saw a convoy of cars, 3 of them, pulling up near the pool area. Out stepped Karen in a wide-brimmed hat, her swimsuit covered with a loud floral wrap, and behind her came a group of 4 other HOA members, all dressed like they were headed to a board meeting rather than someone else's property. She marched right up to the gate, her voice already sharp and full of venom. "You can't block us from using this pool," she declared. "We've talked to our board, and we've decided that you've been unfairly keeping us out. This is for the community, and you're not above the HOA." I straightened up, wiping the sweat and dirt off my hands. "Karen, I'm only going to say this once. This is my property. Your HOA has nothing to do with this land, and I won't be intimidated by a group of people who can't even read a boundary map." She crossed her arms, smirking. "Oh, we'll see about that. I've already spoken to the HOA president, and we're drafting a formal complaint. You'll be fined, and we'll take legal action if necessary." "Fined?" I raised an eyebrow, trying not to laugh. "You can't fine me. Karen, I don't belong to your HOA. I don't pay your fees. I don't use your facilities, and I don't follow your rules. You have zero authority here." Her expression hardened. "We'll see what the court says." She turned to the others, gesturing like she was commanding an army. "Take photos. Document everything. We'll prove this man is unlawfully blocking access to community property." The others began snapping pictures of my pool, my cabin, even my barn, as if their phone cameras would suddenly rewrite history and property records. I stepped forward, blocking their path. "You're trespassing. Leave now or I'll call the sheriff myself." One of the men muttered, "Karen, maybe we should check the records before we quiet." She snapped at him. "He's bluffing." I wasn't bluffing. I pulled my phone from my pocket and started dialing. "Last chance. Karen, you and your friends have 30 seconds to get off my property before I have the sheriff out here again. And this time, I'll press charges for trespassing." Her smug look faltered for just a moment. She huffed, waving her hand as though dismissing me. "This isn't over. You'll be hearing from our lawyer." With that, she turned on her heel, motioning for the others to leave. They climbed back into their cars, still taking photos as they went, and sped off, leaving a trail of dust behind them. I stood there, my jaw tight, watching them disappear. This was no longer just a nuisance, it was a campaign. Karen was stirring up the HOA, and if I didn't act fast, they'd try to drown me in false claims and legal threats. I knew her type: loud, stubborn, and willing to twist the truth if it meant getting her way. That night, I drove into town and met with Sheriff Daniels. He'd been in this county longer than anyone, and he knew every inch of the land. I laid out the situation, from Karen's trespassing to the threat of legal action. Daniels listened, leaning back in his chair with a thoughtful look. "She's bluffing," he said finally. "The HOA can't touch your property if you've got the deeds to prove it. But people like Karen thrive on making noise. Best thing you can do is gather all your paperwork and stay ready. If she tries anything, I'll back you up." "I appreciate that, Sheriff," I said, "but something tells me she's not going to stop at threats." Daniels nodded. "Probably not. Folks like her hate being told no. They think rules are meant for everyone else, but you've got the law on your side. Just keep your cool and don't give her anything she can twist against you." On my way back to the valley, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was planning something bigger. Sure enough, the next morning I woke up to find flyers taped to my front gate and mailbox. They read, "Community Alert Man illegally restricts pool access. Report him." There was even a blurry photo of me standing by the pool, arms crossed, looking every bit like the villain she wanted to paint me as. I crumpled the flyer, anger simmering in my chest. She wasn't just pushing her luck anymore. She was attacking my name, my home, and everything I had built. If she wanted a war, she had just declared one. The morning I found those flyers, something in me hardened. Karen had crossed the line from being an annoyance to becoming a real threat. Not only was she trespassing and lying, but now she was trying to turn the entire community against me. I wasn't about to let her rewrite the truth about my land or the years of blood and sweat I had poured into this valley. I spent the rest of that morning digging through my old files, gathering every scrap of evidence I had. Property deeds, tax records, county maps, receipts for building materials. Every document I had from the day I bought this place went into a thick folder. I even found old photographs of me pouring the concrete for the pool and planting the mesquite trees. If Karen thought she could intimidate me with flyers and legal threats, she was in for a rude awakening. By noon, I was in town, walking straight into the county clerk's office. "Morning, Lisa," I said to the woman behind the counter. Lisa had worked there for 20 years and knew the history of every property in this county. "I need certified copies of my property deeds and the original survey records for the valley." Lisa looked up, surprised. "Someone giving you trouble?" "Sam." I nodded. An HOA group down the road is trying to claim they have rights to my pool. They're spreading lies, and I'm not letting it go any further. She raised an eyebrow. "Figures. Those HOA folks can get a little high and mighty. Let me pull the records for you." She came back 10 minutes later with a stack of papers, each stamped with the county seal. "This should shut them up," she said, sliding the documents across the counter. "Your property lines are as clear as day. That pool isn't even close to their jurisdiction." I thanked her and left, feeling a little more confident. On my way home, I stopped by the sheriff's office to give Daniels an update. I laid the certified documents on his desk. If Karen or her crew show up again, I want there to be no doubt. This is my land, and they have no claim here. Daniels flipped through the pages and gave a firm nod. "Looks good to me. I'll keep this on file in case they try calling us again." "You want me to have a word with them?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to handle this my way first, but if they set foot on my land again, I'll need you backing me up." That evening, as the sun set and painted the valley in shades of orange and gold, I walked the perimeter of my property. I reinforced my fences and added a few more private property signs for good measure. Not that signs ever stopped someone like Karen, but I wanted everything documented and clear. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I drove down to the housing development where the HOA offices were located. As I walked through the lobby, a few folks gave me curious looks. Some of them had probably seen Karen's flyers. I didn't care. I asked to speak with the HOA president, a man named Greg who looked like he'd rather be golfing than dealing with disputes. "Mr. Greg," I said firmly, dropping my folder of documents on his desk, "your board and one of your residents are spreading false claims about my property. This needs to stop now." Greg blinked, clearly taken aback by my tone. "We've received complaints." "Yes, but Karen is lying." I cut in. "Your HOA has zero rights to my land, and I've got county-certified documents to prove it." I opened the folder and laid out the maps and deeds one by one. "Here's the line where your HOA ends. Everything beyond this ridge is mine. Your residents are trespassing, and I won't tolerate it." He stared at the documents for a long moment, then sighed. "Look, I don't want trouble. If the land's yours, then we'll put out a statement to the residents. But Karen, she's hard to deal with. Then make her stop." I said, "Or next time, I'll press charges. I'm done playing games." By the time I left that office, Greg had promised to look into it, but I could tell he didn't have the backbone to stand up to Karen. That meant I'd have to do it myself. That night, I drafted my own letter, not just for Karen, but for every resident in that HOA. I explained, in clear terms, that the pool and Resort Valley were private property, backed by county records. I made it clear that anyone caught trespassing would face legal action. The next morning, I drove through the development and posted copies of the letter on every community board I could find. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to let anyone think I was afraid, either. By midday, I started getting phone calls, some from residents apologizing, others asking me to go easy on Karen. I just told them the truth. Respect my land, and we won't have a problem. But I knew Karen wouldn't let it go. She was too proud, too stubborn. And, sure enough, that evening I spotted her car parked down the hill, just outside my property line. She was on the phone, pacing like a woman plotting her next move. 2 days after I posted my letter around the HOA community boards, I got an unexpected call from the county clerk's office. Lisa's voice was sharp but concerned. "Sam, you might want to know this. Karen and a few folks from the HOA have requested a town meeting to discuss community access rights. They're dragging your name through the mud." I sighed, setting down my hammer. I'd been fixing the barn door again, trying to keep my hands busy while this storm brewed. "When and where? Tomorrow night at the community hall," Lisa said. "And, Sam, you'd better bring every document you've got. Karen's telling everyone you've been blocking a public amenity." I thanked her and hung up. This wasn't just a nuisance anymore. Karen was rallying her troops, hoping to use the court of public opinion to twist the truth. But I had something she didn't have: facts, proof, and the will to fight for what was mine. That night, I gathered every piece of evidence I owned: deeds, survey maps, old receipts, photographs. Every page went into a binder I could carry under my arm. I sat at my kitchen table, looking through each document until I knew them backward and forward. I wasn't just going to show up at that meeting. I was going to end this war once and for all. The following evening, I pulled up to the community hall just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The parking lot was full more cars than I'd expected. Clearly, Karen had stirred up a storm. I walked in with my binder under my arm, boots echoing against the polished wood floor. Heads turned as I entered. Some faces looked curious, others skeptical. And there, at the front, stood Karen, already holding court with a smug smile plastered across her face. "There he is," she said loudly, pointing at me as if I were a criminal on trial. "The man who's keeping this community from enjoying what's rightfully ours." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. I stopped in the middle of the room, scanning the crowd. "Evening, folks," I said, my voice steady and firm. "I hear there's been some confusion about who owns the pool up in my valley. I'm here to clear that up once and for all." Karen's smile faltered just a bit, but she quickly recovered. "Confusion. You've been hoarding a resource that the HOA has every right to use. That pool was built for this community." "And wrong," I said sharply, stepping forward. I dropped the binder on the front table with a loud thud. "This pool was built by me, with my money, on my land. I've got county records and legal deeds that prove it. And I'm tired of hearing lies." I opened the binder, laying out the certified maps and property deeds, each one stamped with the county seal. "Take a good look. This ridgeline marks the end of your HOA property. Everything beyond it, every inch of the Resort Valley, the cabins, and that pool is mine. Always has been. Your fees don't maintain it. Your board doesn't control it. You have no claim here." For a moment, the room was silent. Then someone from the back, an older man, stepped forward to look at the documents. "He's right," the man muttered after a few moments. "The maps are clear. The pool isn't on HOA land." Karen's face turned crimson. That can't be true. He's making this up. We've used that area for years. That doesn't make it yours. I said, locking eyes with her. Just because you decided to wander onto private property doesn't mean you have the right to stay. I let folks pass through sometimes out of kindness, but this is my land. And if you or anyone else sets foot there again without permission, I'll have the sheriff handle it. More murmurs spread through the crowd this time, directed at Karen. People began whispering, clearly realizing she'd stirred up trouble without knowing the facts. Someone spoke up. Karen, did you even check the property lines before making all these claims? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, but she didn't answer. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. This isn't over. We'll take you to court if we have to. I smiled, calm but cold. Do that. I'll bring every document you see here, and I'll win. But if you're smart, you'll walk away now before you waste everyone's time and money. The HOA president, Greg, finally stepped in. His face was pale as he turned to Karen. Karen, I think we need to accept the facts. This property isn't under our jurisdiction. We'll send out a notice to the residents tomorrow clarifying this. Karen looked like she might explode, but she said nothing. The crowd began dispersing, most of them shooting me nods of understanding or even quiet apologies as they left. By the time the hall was empty, Karen was gone, her heels clacking angrily against the floor as she stormed out. I walked back to my truck, the warm night air settling over me like a victory, but I knew Karen well enough by now to realize this wasn't the last I'd see of her. She was the kind of person who couldn't stand losing. Still, for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I had stood my ground, told my side of the story, and let the truth do the talking. The valley was mine, and I wasn't letting anyone take that from me. I thought the town meeting might have put an end to it, but Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. The very next morning, I received a letter delivered by certified mail. Inside was a neatly typed note from a law office in town, threatening legal action for unlawful restriction of community amenities. I laughed out loud when I read it. Karen had clearly hired a lawyer who hadn't bothered to check the facts. Still, I knew better than to ignore it. I gathered all my documents, slipped them into my leather binder, and headed into town to see my own lawyer, Hank Wallace. Hank had been practicing law in this county for over 3 decades, and he knew every land dispute, every property line, and every HOA squabble better than anyone else. He looked over Karen's lawyer's letter, smirking as he read, "She doesn't have a leg to stand on." Sam, this is nothing more than a scare tactic. I'll draft a response and include copies of all your deeds and county records. We'll shut this down before it even reaches a courtroom. Good, I said, leaning back in the chair, because I'm done playing games with her. I want her to understand once and for all that she can't bully me. Hank nodded. Oh, she's about to learn that the hard way. I'll also include a warning if she keeps trespassing or harassing you. We'll file for an injunction and sue her for damages. That usually gets the point across. 2 days later, Hank sent the letter. It wasn't just a polite response, it was a full legal counterstrike. Every page outlined my ownership, with official stamps, dates, and signatures. It ended with a stern warning. Any further harassment or false claims by the HOA or its members will result in legal consequences. I figured that would do the trick, but Karen wasn't finished. That weekend, I spotted her car parked just down the road, watching my property like a hawk. It was almost dark when I saw her walk up to the pool fence, phone in hand, taking pictures as if gathering evidence. I walked out quietly, boots crunching on the gravel, and when she saw me, her face froze. "Karen," I said, voice calm but cutting, "you're trespassing again, and this time, I'm not warning you twice." She puffed up, defiant. "I'm documenting everything for my lawyer. You'll see this isn't over." "Oh, it's over," I said. "Because right now, I'm calling Sheriff Daniels, and this time, I'll press charges." I pulled my phone out and started dialing. Her confidence wavered for the first time. You wouldn't dare," I smiled. "Try me." She stood there for a moment, glaring, then finally spun on her heel and stormed back to her car. I watched her drive off, dust flying behind her, and I knew I'd just hit her pride harder than ever. But I also knew something she didn't. I had more than legal power on my side. I had proof of something that could truly end this fight. Later that night, I dug through an old metal lockbox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were not just my property documents, but the original contract I signed with the previous landowner. It included a clause stating that the HOA had explicitly relinquished any rights to this valley decades ago, long before Karen ever moved in. I hadn't thought much about it before, but now I saw its value. It wasn't just proof I could use it as the final nail in the coffin. The next morning, I called Hank and told him about the document. "Bring it in," he said with a chuckle. "We'll make sure Karen's lawyer sees it. She'll have no choice but to back down after this." That afternoon, Hank sent another letter, this one with a copy of the original contract attached. It was undeniable. When Karen got it, I imagined she must have fumed. But this time, there was nothing she could do. No more threats. No more trespassing. I didn't see her car on my road again after that. 2 days later, Greg, the HOA president, called me personally. His voice was almost apologetic. "Sam, I just want to say, we're sorry for all this mess. Karen went too far. The board is officially dropping any claims or complaints against you." I let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Good. Tell Karen and the rest of your residents that if they stay off my land, there won't be any more problems. But if they try something like this again, I won't hesitate to take it to court." Greg sighed. "Understood. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth now." As I hung up the phone, I walked out onto my porch and looked across the valley. The air felt lighter. The sun was setting, painting the pool and hills in warm gold, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had my peace back. Karen had tried every trick she knew, but in the end, the truth and hard proof had beaten her. I poured myself a strong cup of coffee and sat by the pool, listening to the quiet ripples of the water. This was my land, my home, and I wasn't going to let anyone, HOA or otherwise, take it from me. The days following Greg's call felt like a deep breath after a long storm. For the first time in weeks, the valley was quiet again. There were no HOA cars pulling up uninvited, no angry voices at the gate, no flyers accusing me of things I didn't do, just the warm Arizona sun, the smell of cedar and mesquite, and the sound of the wind rolling softly through the hills. I spent the morning walking the perimeter of my land, checking the fences the way I always did. Everything felt still, as if the valley itself was letting me know that the fight was over. When I reached the pool, I stopped to admire it. The water shimmered under the sunlight, the stone border warm from the heat of the day. This pool wasn't just a place to swim. It was my reward for years of hard labor, mixing concrete, hauling stone, and fighting the elements to build something worth keeping. Karen's battle had taught me something I didn't realize I needed to learn again: the value of standing my ground, not just for property, but for principle. She had tried everything: intimidation, lies, even legal threats, but in the end, the truth had cut through it all, and truth, I knew, was something that couldn't be shaken by noise or arrogance. That evening, I sat on my porch as the sun began to dip low, painting the valley in shades of orange and deep red. I sipped a glass of cold, sweet tea and thought back to the start of all this. It was almost laughable now, one woman thinking she had the right to take what wasn't hers simply because she was loud enough to call 911. She had no idea that the man she was yelling at owned not just the pool, but every inch of this valley for miles. I could have let anger eat at me, but instead, I felt something different, a kind of peace. I had won, not by shouting, but by standing firm, by letting the work of my hands and the proof of my records speak louder than her tantrums. I'd protected not just the land, but the quiet life I'd built here, and that meant more to me than any argument. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, I saw an older couple from the HOA standing there, looking sheepish. "We just wanted to apologize," the man said, holding his hat in his hands. "We didn't know the whole story. Karen, well, she has a way of convincing people, but we realize now this land is yours, and we're sorry for any trouble we caused." I smiled, shaking his hand. No harm done as long as it stops here. I'm not against anyone. I just want my property respected. They nodded and left, and I watched them go, feeling a sense of closure. It wasn't about grudges or revenge. It was about drawing a line and holding it when someone tried to push past it. That night, I lit a small fire by the pool and sat on the deck, listening to the quiet hum of crickets. The stars were so clear you could almost count them, each one glowing above the dark ridgeline. I thought about all the years I'd spent building this place, the long days when the sun felt like it would burn me alive, and the cold nights when I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But now, with the pool reflecting the starlight and the valley resting calm around me, I knew I'd built something worth defending. I took a slow breath, letting it all settle in. Life out here isn't easy. It's not about HOA rules or neat lawns or board meetings. It's about grit, patience, and the determination to make something out of nothing. And when someone tries to take that away, you have to be ready to stand like a mountain. As the fire crackled, I thought about what I'd tell anyone watching this story unfold. Don't let people like Karen push you around. If you know what's yours, protect it. If you've worked for something, stand by it. The valley grew darker, and I felt content in a way I hadn't in weeks. This was my home, my sanctuary, and nothing, not even the loudest HOA Karen, was going to change that. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about land, it's about dignity, about knowing that hard work and truth will always outshine noise and lies. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what's worth protecting in your life. And if you enjoy hearing real stories of resilience and justice, consider subscribing to the channel or exploring more of our videos. There's always another tale of courage waiting to be told.